Legend of Grimrock 2 is an old-school dungeon-crawling RPG released in 2014 by Almost Human Games. The game begins with a short cutscene showing a ship carrying prisoners crashing onto an island. There's no voiceover going, "We've been imprisoned after being falsely accused." None of that. Grimrock confidently keeps it very simple. The cage with the 4 protagonists washes up on the beach, and you are thrown right into the gameplay. After getting your bearings, you will very quickly realize that this is no ordinary island, and that something more is going on. So you go exploring to try and uncover the mystery. It is the most basic fantasy premise ever, but it's so on point for a game like Grimrock, and I so wish more indie games did it like this, because telling a good story in the right way is incredibly hard, and fumbled storytelling can turn even the best games into a slog. Instead, Almost Human Games clearly put a lot of effort into the world building, and let the environments tell their own little stories. Sometimes literally, because there are these magical stone heads all over the island, which offer some kind of cryptic wisdom that is usually connected to either some secret or a way to progress. Grimrock does an excellent job at building up a sense of adventure and wonder, with very little, in large parts by effectively utilizing your own imagination. This is very important because the gameplay is only about 40% combat and 60% exploration and figuring out puzzles or secrets. As you can see, the world of Grimrock is grid-based, meaning you can't move around freely, but always only from tile to tile using WASD. Your perspective is locked into one of the 4 cardinal directions, between which you can change at any time. When standing still, you can also press right-click to get a better view of your surroundings. What might surprise you is that this game is not turn-based. Everything happens in real time, which definitely makes for a very unique combat system. We'll get to it later. But for walking around the map, while it does take a short while to get used to the sharp camera movements, it works well, letting you explore at whatever pace you want, while the world and its physics continue happening. This also allows for much more variety in puzzles than if the world was just static. And despite this fairly limited movement system, Grimrock is one of the best games I've ever played in terms of exploration. In modern, especially AAA titles, you will often have worlds that are incredibly vast and promise to be filled with interesting things to find. But when you actually play these games, the primary way you explore is through the user interface. Most commonly, you get a compass bar at the top of your screen that constantly feeds you information about your surroundings, and is therefore the first place you look at when walking around, instead of looking for maybe an interesting landmark. Following question marks is exploration in the same way you explore new toppings on a pizza. In contrast to that, Legend of Grimrock's UI is very limited. You just get your party's portraits and their weapons in the bottom right. For exploration you have to rely on your senses. Obviously your eyes, but also your ears. Sound plays a big role, especially in the claustrophobic dungeons, where it can often warn you of an impending ambush, or help you uncover secret treasure. One of my favorite parts of Grimrock is that there is always a tell when there's a secret to be found, so the only actual difficult part is figuring out how to get to it. Even things like hidden buttons will mostly be in places like a suspicious dead-end corridor, and the wall patterns for each material repeat, so your eyes will get very good at spotting anything unusual. And while there is an incredible variety of puzzles and secrets, there is something I like about them which they all share in common. The solution is never the first idea you think of. Right from the easiest starting puzzles, Grimrock really pushes you to think outside the box. And like a good puzzle should, it makes you feel very clever when you finally figure out the solution. There's the eureka moment and the feeling of course that's what they meant, or of course that's how it works. It seems so obvious now. You can't combine items or anything silly like that. You can't jump or run, so your actions are very limited. But despite that, every puzzle feels like a new challenge. I was really impressed that all of the solutions in the game felt logical, fair, and like the general difficulty respects your intelligence. Now in my case, it sometimes respected it a bit too much, and I could not solve all of the puzzles without help. A blessing and a curse of playing games in the current year is that you can Google advice or the solution to any problem you come across. If you spend 15 minutes seemingly exhausting all of your options, the urge to just look up the answer, because it must be something stupid anyways, is very strong. But every single time, it was I that was stupid and had some sort of blind spot. I think the best example I can give is the compass. You know how these work, right? It points up for north, down for south, left for west, and right for east. You find it pretty early in the game, and it's an important part of a few puzzles and secrets. And I would get stuck and frustrated on these, and at first, when I would Google the answer, and it would be something like left, right, down, up, instead of my solution, right, left, down, up, I would take it as just me misunderstanding some of the clues. But then it would happen again, and then again, and I began to ask myself, am I just, demented? Have I been thinking east is west and west is east my whole life? I genuinely started to doubt myself. But then it hit me. The compass literally just points to the north. Always, no matter which way you turn. So yes, when the red arrow points right, that is west, because west is to the left of north. It's extremely obvious once you realize this, but it was easy to take certain concepts for granted, making it extremely difficult to arrive to the correct conclusion. And that is exactly how a lot of the puzzles in Grimrock can be. They are usually fairly simple, but only once you figure out the correct approach. And I found this design really enjoyable. So the whole exploration half of the game is excellent. There are various biomes with starkly different atmospheres, from more fairy tale-like forests and meadows, to the gloomy, downright creepy cemetery, crypts or dungeons, and the world is cleverly designed with many unlockable shortcuts, always allowing you to easily backtrack. And so we get to the combat and the RPG elements. When you start the game, the default option is surprisingly to use a pre-made party, but you can also make your own. There are 8 classes to pick from, but they are not as character-defining as in most other games. They differ in how much health and energy they get per level, with energy being used for spells, but also for weapon abilities, and then they each have 1 or 2 unique passive abilities. By far the most impactful class is the Alchemist, because it lets you grow potion ingredients in your inventory, which makes sure you always have a steady supply of health and energy recovery. There is also a rare ingredient that makes permanent stat boost potions, which can also be grown. I had my alchemist use missile weapons from the back, and it worked really well. Then the equally big decision is what race you want your character to be, with an unusual but pretty awesome selection of human, minotaur, lizardman, insectoid or ratling. These modify the base stats as well as giving a small passive bonus, and unique options for the last part of character creation, the traits, which are more mild passive bonuses. All characters then get access to the same skills, which are simple damage or stat increases, but they have breakpoints at which they give special bonuses. For example, 3 points in light weapons unlocks dual wielding, or 3 points in dodge reduces your cooldowns. You can only get up to 15 skill points, so each one counts. Overall, the RPG elements are very streamlined and easy to understand, which I found refreshing. There are 3 difficulties: easy, normal and hard, and I chose normal because I was pretty convinced I would not enjoy the combat. The way you attack enemies in this game is by right-clicking your weapons in the bottom right corner. Each weapon has its own cooldown before you can use it again. It starts to get a bit more complicated for spells, because you need to draw the correct combination of signs to cast them, and you have to do this every time. There are no hotkeys. On top of this, there is the movement, with which you try to circle around your enemies so that you hit them from the back or side while they spend time turning around. A 1v1 duel in a 4-tile square means you basically shouldn't ever get hit. There are enemies that can turn super quick or even attack to the sides, so it doesn't work against everyone, but it's the default pattern of combat. To stop you from just doing that over and over, you will mostly be against overwhelming odds, so fighting fair isn't really an option. If you ever get surrounded, you are pretty much dead. It will just take a while, because even if you manage to kill an enemy, it will instantly get replaced with a new one, so you can never get out. Getting hit from the sides also means your two backline characters start getting attacked, and they are probably much less durable than your frontline. There are tools like ice bombs to protect yourself from one side, but you will not have enough to spam these every fight. Grimrock also enjoys testing the player with ambushes, which puts you under stress because you'll have to very quickly orient yourself and find a suitable place to stand your ground. For about the first 50% of the game, it felt like I am fighting the controls more than the enemies. I would often turn too far or misclick my spells or potions. Sure, I made it harder for myself than I had to. For example, you can just drink potions from your inventory instead of swapping between weapon sets, but even once I got comfortable with the controls, the feel of combat didn't really change all that much. It doesn't ever look cool. In fact, it mostly looks silly as you abuse the AI turn rates, and it never feels mechanically satisfying because there is not much skill in it. It's mostly about learning not to panic. The one aspect that the combat does do really well is that finding new, better items makes a noticeable impact on how strong your party is. So it feeds into the exploration, and it makes finding hidden, legendary items even more exciting. On normal, most enemies died in roughly 3 to 8 attacks, so similarly to the puzzles, if you choose the correct strategy for a fight, which means you avoid getting surrounded, it's over pretty quickly. So I didn't hate the combat, it definitely didn't ruin the game for me or anything like that. I respect it for being unique, and the contrast is necessary. If Grimrock was only about puzzles, it would definitely be a worse game. But the combat is not what you will remember it for. I think I've solved, fought, and found almost everything in the game, and the playthrough took me 22 hours to finish, which felt like the perfect length. I consider Legend of Grimrock 2 a near flawless execution of its niche. It stays uncompromisingly true to its vision in all aspects, and it manages to cultivate something so absurdly rare in video games, an actual strong sense of exploration, which cannot exist without the game letting you get lost and confused. Thanks for watching.
There's a bracer to the left of the chest. Maybe you can light it?